I've got some sockets to replace around the house, and I noticed there's something brand new on the market. So today I'm going to be fitting and reviewing the new MK Logic Plus Rapid Fix socket, which is so easy to fit, you don't even need a screwdriver. No, except for these little ones on the front. You probably need a screwdriver for those. Before I show you how I go about fitting this type of socket, I thought I'd explain a bit about what makes these sockets different, and it all starts with the way we connect wires together. You see, once upon a time we used to connect, let's say in lighting circuits, wires together using terminal blocks like this or junction boxes like this. Now, all of these use screws to grip the cables, so I must admit I've used dozens of these over the years, and I've always found them particularly tricky, especially when you've got 4 cables coming in, the maximum they can deal with. And I've snapped a few in my time by over-tightening them, trying to get the cables to sit in these little recesses properly. So recently the industry has seen these being overtaken by screwless terminals or spring claps, which don't use screws in any way to clamp the cables together. The ones I use look a little bit like this. There's various different types and sizes. This type of connector makes life a lot easier because all you have to do is lift up this little bar, put a cable in and pop it down, and suddenly you've got the perfect connection every time. No worry about how tight you should be screwing it in. So I must admit, I find them easier to work with than the screw type, especially as I always seem to be doing this type of thing in a loft or somewhere really dusty with no light. So I suppose it's no surprise that MK have now gone one step further and developed a double socket using the same type of system. This is called the MK Logic Plus Rapid Fix double socket. It's based on their industry-leading Logic Plus socket, which I had fitted all over my old house. Now these have been around for some time, and I think they're one of the best on the market because the quality of them is really good. They've got a really nice feel to the switch, but also I found out that they've got a unique 3-pin shutter system, so you can't actually open the shutter with a screwdriver and get into the main terminals. How do I know about that? Don't ask. So with the new socket, it's essentially the same as the old Logic Plus, but with the added benefit of screwless terminals on the back. So let's have a look at the close-up of the back. So the first thing you notice are these 3 sets of 3 terminal connectors, which look very similar to the spring clamp connectors because I suppose they are. These are obviously for the live, neutral and earth, and what's great is they're colour coded, so even people like me can actually see which is which without having to sort of hold the socket up to the light to see if you can find a L or an N. There's 3 entry points for each one, which allows 2 wires for the in and out of a normal ring circuit, plus 1 for the spur as well. 3 is the maximum you should ever have going into the back of a socket. If you've got more than 3, then something isn't right, and it might mean that you've got 2 spurs coming off of one socket, which isn't allowed. And I definitely wouldn't recommend that. So just like the normal spring connectors we saw just now, they just flip up to open, and then you pop in the cable from below and then clip them down. This makes the perfect connection. And it's as simple as that. Just 2 things you need to make sure of when you're doing this. 1, obviously, you need to make sure that you're putting the right wire in the right connector. So brown for live, blue for neutral, and green for earth as well. And having colour, being colour coded really helps with getting that right. And 2, you also need to make sure that the insulation is stripped back on the cable to the right amount, and that's 10 millimeters. However, you don't even need to have to measure that, as there's a strip on the back here where you can actually offer up the cable to see if the insulation is cut to the right amount. If you want to see how I strip insulation to cables and wires, please have a look at my installing an outside socket video, where I take you through this in quite some detail. So, if the insulation is left too long on these, you may get a bad or no connection at all because the clamp is clamping down on insulation rather than the copper. And similarly, if you take away too much insulation, once it's in the hole and the bar is down, you may still be able to see some copper wire poking out, which isn't really good practice. Once it's in and it's connected on any socket, you shouldn't be able to see any copper at all. It's quite easy though, once you've cut a couple of these, to end up with 10mm and the right length. So once the bar is down and it's clamped on, you can be sure that you've got a really good connection, and these wires are never going to go anywhere. It's designed to still be clamped tight for as long as the socket is in place, and it's designed to be tight for years and years. So let's go inside the house and I'll show you the sequence that I use to ensure that the electricity is off and safe before fitting this into my living room. So this is the first socket I'm going to be replacing with the rapid fix socket. Before we start this though, I think it's worth saying that although us homeowners are allowed to replace sockets and light fittings like this under Part P of the UK building regulations, if you don't feel comfortable doing it and you don't understand electricity, I would highly recommend, if you need to, getting an electrician to do this sort of work for you. So the way that I like to understand and be sure that the electricity is turned off before I do any work on something like this is by using a socket tester like this. You can get these at any DIY shop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it in and turn it on. I'm then going to go to the distribution board, and when I turn off the right socket, then hopefully this will go quiet and I'll know that I've got the right socket. So let's turn it on and then I'll turn off the power. So this is my consumer unit, which is pretty up high and out the way. I need to find the right circuit to turn off, and I've got various ones here. I've got water heater, upstairs sockets, upstairs lighting. Here I've got one that says downstairs sockets. Now if I turn this off, then suddenly I should stop hearing the noise if it's the right circuit. Yeah, okay, so it's the right circuit. I can turn it back on again. So I've got the right one. So I'm going to turn that off. Now I'm lucky that I'm in the house on my own, so no one's going to touch that. But if you're in the house with a family, you have to be aware that someone could interfere with this while you're touching the cables at the other end, especially if you've got teenage children who suddenly can't play their PlayStation because they haven't got any power, and they also know how to come and flip the switches back. So you should really get a lock and make sure that's locked off so no one touches it. So the socket is isolated. It shouldn't be any electricity going through there. I've got one more test that I like to do once I get to the back of the socket, just because I've got the right type of screwdriver anyway. And I'll show you that now. And because I own one, I always check with a screwdriver like this that lights up in the middle here if it senses electricity. And I've just checked this on something live, so I know it's working. And that's not lighting up. So I can be 100% sure now that this is all isolated. If we remove the existing one, I'll just undo these. And it's best if you make sure that these don't touch, else we may have a problem with the RCD tripping out. So just keep those separate to each other, get rid of that. So if I bring in the new socket, I can compare how much insulation has been stripped from these relative to what I need. So looking at that, that looks to me like maybe 12, 13 millimeters. So I'm just going to trim a little bit of copper off of each one of these just to make sure that it's the right length to fit into here. So it's just a matter of now popping these up and installing the cables. Now I can see that I've got two cables for each colour. So this is on a standard ring circuit. There's no spur off of this. So all I'm going to do is open two of these on each. It doesn't matter which two, and then just start popping them in. So just have to offer this up and clip them in. Just give it a quick tug after each one, just to make sure they're in. They're actually rated at 3 kilogram pull on each one, which means that they'll stay there essentially forever. Just make sure that this insulation on the earth is back far enough that it doesn't cause a problem. And it's so much easier doing these one at a time rather than trying to juggle 4 wires at the same time. So that looks okay. I can't see any copper at all. So I'm just going to splay these wires so I can get it back into the box. Just push that back in there, making sure the cables are either side. This is a 25mm back box that I've got here. So I've got this, probably the smallest that anyone has in the UK, and it just about fits, which is good. One screw either side. So that goes in fairly snug like that. So now I'm going to go back to the distribution board, flip the switch, and then we can come back and test it with this. So that is working properly, which means that this is now fully installed. I must say, I do like those clips on the back there. It makes it really quick and easy to get the cables in and properly fitted. And I particularly like the colour coding on the terminals. It means that it's really difficult to get them the wrong way round. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on my channel and please subscribe. So I've got another 10 of these now to fit around the house, but at that speed, actually, I don't think it's going to take me too long. So until next week, I'll see you then.